Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking Leo Tolstoy's incredibly intense narrative, Master and Man. Now, you might think, oh, it's just a story about a bad snowstorm. But actually, it's so much more than that. It's this profound psychological study of two men trapped in a deadly, unyielding Russian blizzard. It literally strips away all those complex layers of society, of wealth, of status, and leaves us looking at nothing but raw, unfiltered human nature. So, what is the true value of a man's life when a blizzard strips absolutely everything else away? Keep that philosophical question right in the back of your mind as we go through this, because, while on the surface this is a totally harrowing survival story, it's ultimately about what truly matters when death is staring you right in the face. And this brilliantly illustrates the harsh, unforgiving Russian environment that serves as a battleground for our five-act narrative. We've got a man, a horse, and a world entirely consumed by ice and wind. This frozen landscape, it doesn't care about your social status. It doesn't care about your bank account or your ambitions. It only cares about one thing: survival. Tolstoy actually describes the storm as a sea of blustering snow raging from above and below. Just picture that. It's a howling, chaotic wind hammering them from every single direction. It's incredibly disorienting, it's terrifying, and it plunges us straight into the high stakes of this winter storm. It's a minimalist but intensely visceral visualization of the howling wind. Now, what's really interesting to look at here is the stark difference between our two main characters. On one hand, we have the master, Vasily Andreevich. He's bundled up in two heavy fur coats, he's carrying 3,000 rubles, and he is driven entirely by immense wealth and greed. On the other hand, we have the man, Nikita. He's a peasant laborer in a torn, greasy sheepskin coat and felt boots with patched soles. He really represents poverty and quiet subjugation. So we have two vastly different men heading into the exact same storm. Which brings us right into Act 1, the hasty departure. So it's the day after St. Nicholas's Day, which is a holiday, and the weather is already turning dangerous. But Vasily, he is entirely consumed by the need to leave right that second. Why? Well, he wants to secure the Goryachin Grove. He wants to beat out competitors coming from the town, and he calculates he can make thousands of rubles on this one single deal. This financial obsession completely blinds him. He completely ignores his pregnant wife pleading with him to stay home or to at least take a guide. Instead, he forces the poorly dressed Nikita out into the freezing weather to drive his sledge. Let's move to Act 2, Lost in the Storm, and see how this builds. Because literally, as soon as they leave the village, they descend into a complete, disorienting whiteout. They quickly lose sight of the waymarking stakes, stumble off the road entirely, and end up driving over frozen potato fields. And notice the dynamic here. This is key. Despite Vasily's absolute arrogance and authority, it's actually the peasant Nikita and their intelligent horse Mukorty who have to navigate the deep snow and find their way to a brief pocket of safety in a village called Grishkino.
This brings us to Act 3, the brief refuge.
They actually manage to find shelter in a wealthy peasant home, and Nikita greedily starts thawing his frozen limbs with like 5 glasses of hot tea. But Vasily's fatal pride is perfectly summed up in one sentence. He says, lose an hour and you can't catch it up in a year. He flat out rejects the warm beds. He rejects the safety offered by their incredibly kind hosts. He is just so terrified of losing his timber deal that he forces Nikita and the horse right back out into the deadly freezing night. Which leads us to our darkest chapter, Act 4, Trapped and Abandoned. Out there, the storm becomes a violent hurricane of snow, hopelessly trapping them in a steep ravine with an exhausted horse. So the crucial point is how these two men react to impending death. Vasily is completely consumed by panic. He paces around, counting his imaginary millions, and ultimately decides his life is worth way more than Nikita's. He unties the horse to just abandon him. Nikita, meanwhile, he accepts his fate. He huddles in a piece of sackcloth in the sledge, makes peace with God, and prepares to quietly freeze to death. He rode into the dark. Vasily's escape attempt is completely frantic. He has absolutely no idea where he's going. He just pushes the horse forward, desperately trying to save his own skin, leaving his servant behind to die alone in the cold. The snow blinded him. The wind is howling. The darkness is absolute. Vasily is totally lost, just riding in these endless, terrifying circles among desperately tossing stalks of wormwood. Panic completely takes over his mind. And then the horse stumbled. Mukorty falls into a massive snowdrift, throwing Vasily right off into the deep snow. And as Vasily flounders there completely alone, This terrifying realization hits him. All of his wealth, his shops, his taverns, his iron-roofed barn, none of it can save him. In the face of nature, he is entirely powerless, facing a cold, totally meaningless death. But then we reach Act 5, Awakening and Sacrifice. Stumbling blindly through the ravine, Vasily's circular path miraculously leads him right back to the snow-covered sledge and to Nikita, who is buried and barely alive. And here we see this profound physical and spiritual shift. First, using that same decisive energy he usually saves for his business deals, Vasily violently rakes the snow off Nikita. Second, he opens his own heavy fur coats. And finally, he lies entirely on top of the freezing peasant, using his own glowing body heat to warm him, tucking the coats around him to block out the deadly wind. As Vasily lies there, slowly freezing to protect Nikita, the material obsessions of his life literally begin to shed from his mind. The Gordishkin Grove, the tavern, the 3,000 rubles. He realizes they are entirely meaningless against the forces of nature. The absolutely only thing that matters in this moment is the life of the man breathing beneath him. 0. That is the exact value of all Vasily's money and status in the face of death. 0. It cannot buy him a single degree of warmth or a single extra breath of air. But in letting go of all that, he finds something else. He thinks, Nikita is alive, so I too am alive. In his final moments, as the cold literally takes his life, Vasily doesn't feel fear. He feels this strange, joyful tenderness. He experiences a true spiritual awakening, a complete oneness with Nikita. He finally understands what it means to truly live, right at the exact moment of his death. The aftermath of the story brings us back to reality. The next day, peasants dig them out. Vasily is found frozen solid, shielding his servant. The horse, too, unfortunately perishes. But Nikita survives. He loses 3 toes to frostbite, but he actually goes on to live for 20 more years as a humble farm laborer and watchman, eventually dying peacefully at home. Vasily's sacrifice worked. Vasily lost his physical life in the snow that night, but did the blizzard finally force him to find his soul? It's a tragic yet deeply beautiful survival story that really forces us to question our own priorities. I highly recommend reflecting on this as you go about your day. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what truly matters.